Is the market a little bit more cheered now, and are we more risk on simply because the commentary from Beijing recently, meaning in the last 24, 36 hours, seems to be more positive, more concessionary, etc.? Or is the market simply starting to hit sort of a wall, sort of tariff or trade tension fatigue?
I think it's probably a bit of both. The story around trade has been trade war on, trade war postponed, trade war back on, trade war postponed, and been going back and forth for a long time now. So I think markets and investors generally have got to a point where they want to see something a bit more concrete. And you're right, I mean, there is a degree to which the news flow over the last couple of days has been somewhat more positive. Earlier in the week, when the talks between Wilbur Ross and the Chinese side ended with no statement, some interpreted that as a negative. But then you could argue, well, the fact that they didn't criticise each other in a big picture sense, the fact that you hear there's constant talk about some sort of argy-bargy going on, discussing amounts by which China might increase imports from the US. I think those things are being taken positively by the market. And maybe investors are coming around to the view that the announcement last week by Trump about putting those tariffs on with a finalisation of Friday next week, that's just another negotiating tactic. So, yeah, I think markets are taking a somewhat more relaxed view to this, but obviously the risks are certainly still there.
What is the biggest risk out there at the moment, Shane?
That's a good question. Obviously, a lot of people would say, well, it's the trade war risk, it's Italy, the North Korean US summit going wrong. But I actually think the bigger risk is that the US economy goes into overheating phase, leads to a surprise increase in inflation, and therefore the Fed has to put the brakes on a little bit harder, or maybe a lot harder. I think that's the biggest fundamental risk. At the moment, the markets are taking these geopolitical issues in their stride. You know, it's causing volatility, but we haven't seen a sharp fall in markets in response to them. But if the Fed had to get a lot more aggressive, that would change the equation. Now, I'm optimistic that will be avoided, but by the same token, I do think the Fed will end up doing 4 hikes this year, so a bit more than the market's assuming. I think the market's assuming two more, whereas I reckon they'll do 3 more to get up to 4. And I do think that whatever indicator you look at in the US, they're all pointing to strength.